Welcome to Chromatic Counsel podcast, where law, leadership, and color collide. I'm your host, Kerry Heaps, and I have a great show lined up for you today. Keep in mind, if you were looking to have a color alignment system done, click on the link in the show notes below. You can learn more about it and how it can benefit your law practice. And today I have a really esteemed guest. I'm excited to have him join me. My guest today is Dean Tong. He knows firsthand how devastating false allegations can be. And he turned that experience into a 30-year career helping families, attorneys, and courts uncover the truth. Dean is a forensic child abuse expert, author, and consultant whose work has shaped how complex custody and abuse cases are handled nationwide. Dean, welcome to the show.
Kerry, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about your earlier in your career for those who may not be familiar with you. Kind of what lead us into what kind of got you started in doing what you're doing right now.
Yeah, that was 40 years ago, uh, and firsthand experience. I got involved in a very protracted divorce and custody battle in the mid 80s. I was accused of sexual abuse of my 3-year-old daughter. I got arrested. This was all in Jacksonville, Florida, and of course the charges were dropped, but I had to endure a 15-month no contact order pending the dropping of the charges. I couldn't see my son as well as my daughter. I wasn't ever accused of abusing him, of course. At any rate, I didn't know much at that point, the law as I do now, or the science. And I didn't know that even though they couldn't prosecute me and convict me beyond a reasonable doubt, that a judge could err on the side of caution on the side of my child or children
Mhm.
in the divorce court, where the evidence drops from 95% to 51% preponderance of evidence. It's all discretion by the judge. So I had to endure an additional 3 years of supervised chaperone monitored visitation. I couldn't see my kids alone. Uh, One time I traveled from Georgia, where I was living temporarily, and showed up for a visitation. And when I kissed my daughter on the cheek, the social worker said I couldn't do that.
Mm.
That was inappropriate behavior. So it was pretty stressful, and a lot of hoops I had to jump through just to be a normal dad again. I finally got unsupervised visitation in '89, but never again would enjoy unsupervised overnight visitation with my kids. Never could see them alone overnight. So the best I got was about 8 hours on a Sunday.
Mm.
And I started talking about it, speaking out. I went to the media. They covered my story, the Jacksonville, Florida Times-Union newspaper. I ran for politics in '94, state house representative, where I met former Governor Jeb Bush
Mhm.
from Florida, and started becoming familiar with the laws and science. And I just kept stepping up that ladder to a speaker, consultant, author, published my first book in '92. I'm now under contract to release my fourth book with a psychologist that'll be coming out from an academic house soon in 2026. And I've now consulted, well, I just came back from Pennsylvania last week, where I testified in my 20th state. So now I've consulted in all 50 states, and I've testified in 20 of the 50 states. I've had over 30,000 consults in the last 30 years since '95, and have been hired in over 1,300 cases. So I run a very busy practice. No disrespect to the attorneys out there, but they're not educated or trained to litigate and try these cases in law school. They may get a smattering of educational materials, but they clearly don't have the literature review that I possess. So um, I bring a lot of experience. I bring a lot of victories under my belt in these cases. I testify against the government. So I go up against child forensic interviewers, therapists, child protective investigators for CPS, police officers, sex crime detectives, all of the above. So you can imagine, it's basically you're presumed guilty, and you have to prove a negative to prove your innocence. That's what you're up against in these cases.
And I was going to ask you, what was one case that made you realize the gravity and complexity of abuse allegations? But it sounds like it's your own, that your own case. Or do you have another one as well that you helped
Well,
someone?
yeah. So back in the mid '80s, we didn't have the law and the science that we have now.
Mhm.
That makes it a little easier. We certainly didn't have computers and Google and Facebook and social media and iPods and iPads and iPhones and all that stuff we have now. We didn't have back then. So you had LexisNexis and you had Westlaw and you had the law library. That's all you had. Um, but the science hadn't even been published yet. Suggestibility, how memory works in children, memory source contamination, how false memories can be implanted in the minds and come out through the mouths of children through well-meaning, well-intentioned, but misguided professionals who don't know that they don't know. And again, no disrespect, but there's a huge literature review on my side of the coin. And when I say my side of the coin, I'm talking about the unsubstantiated or false accusations of child sexual abuse side. And Dr. David Finkelhor released a study a few years ago. He is the head of the Crimes Against Children Laboratory in Durham, New Hampshire. He did a 32-year study from 1990 to 2022 that showed that the incidence of child sexual and physical abuse has decreased by 63%, almost two-thirds, but the number of reports have remained stable. So that tells you right there that the number of unsubstantiated or unfounded reports have blossomed immeasurably.
Mhm.
And we're not talking about lies. We're not talking about fabrications. We're talking about confabulations, unintentionally deceiving, using uh, perhaps junk therapy, junk science techniques such as hypnosis, guided imagery,
Mhm.
which can help implant false memories in the minds of children, even adults that come forward decades later in the future. Again, no disrespect to the Me Too movement, but this is part of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And you've been a media commentator in a lot of high profile cases. I think the Kobe Bryant case, and I think also Michael Jackson, correct? You in
That's
that one.
correct.
So how has media coverage of these, false allegations shaped public perception and also the way attorneys are approaching these cases? Because I'm sure some of them might be referring to those cases and some of them may not.
Yeah, so I think they've covered it here and there, and perhaps to appease the late public. They'll cover a case like Johnny Depp, who claimed he was falsely accused by Amber Heard, right? Then went to court, or they'll cover a case like psychologist Christine Blasey Ford against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh on national television on CNN in 2017, 8 years ago. She claimed that he sexually harassed or abused her decades ago, back in the 80s. And of course, that turned out to be false. So they'll cover this issue, but make no mistake, uh, public service announcements, and basically ads that proclaim children don't lie, they're not mistaken about disclosing sexual assault, they must be believed or protected at all costs. That is the operating maxim here.
Mhm.
That is the mantra. The other side, they don't like to talk about it, to be clear, because they don't want the people to know the amount of money that is being spent in the judicial system, in the child protection system, to protect our most vulnerable resource. And I'm not saying that kids don't need protecting and that abuse doesn't happen, because of course, both of those are happening and happening at alarming rates. But there was another side here where families are intervened upon. If you don't have the wallet, if you don't have the resources to fight back against a system that has unlimited resources, a behemoth, if you will, you can get as much justice as you can afford. And so, especially in family court, you're not entitled to a free attorney or free experts, such as myself in family court, because a judge will not declare you indigent or inform a pauperous in a family court. They might in independency or TPR court, where your rights can be terminated, or if you've been arrested in a criminal case, but not in a family court case. So it's a very intimidating, overpowering, overwhelming system. They come at you at all sides. And look, I go up against them all the time. Um, I've had my deposition taken, scores of times in these cases. And so, lawyers need help.
Mhm.
When a lawyer says, I don't need help, and there's an element of science involved,
Mhm.
a anogenital rape exam or a child forensic interview or a kid's being seen in TFCBT, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy with a therapist. Yes, you need help.
And I know you just mentioned you came back from Pennsylvania, so you've served as an expert witness across a lot of different states. Are
Yeah.
you finding any special challenges when you encounter working in different jurisdictions, or anything that seems to be handled differently?
Yeah, so the state I just returned from, Pennsylvania, the law there is FRYE, Frye, governs the admissibility of science and expert theories and testimony in Pennsylvania. The most common case law is Daubert, Daubert. But in Pennsylvania, it's the old FRYE test. So as an expert, you should know before you come under oath what the law is governing your findings and opinions. You should know that Fry requires your findings and opinions to be generally accepted by the entire psychological scientific community. If you're in a Daubert state like my state of Florida, you should know that the law is stricter and goes beyond Fry to require that that theory you're talking about, parental alienation or SAID, sexual allegation of divorce, whatever that theory is, has to be published, has to be peer reviewed, has to be tested, has to have a known error rate. And then the last criterion is whether that science has been accepted by the general psychological scientific community. So there are five factors to be met under Daubert, when there's only one to be met on under Fry. The other consideration for experts is, so for example, in my state of Florida and Missouri's another state, you're allowed to get depositions of child victims. Okay. Although the rule changed in my state where now you need permission from a judge to depose a child under the age of 16, very few states allow depositions of children in these cases. So you can't get a psych eval of the child victim. That's not going to happen because the child is the crime scene. We're talking about he said, she said, they said, and it's all hearsay, right? Because
Mhm.
only 5% of the time you're going to have medical traumatic findings from a rape exam. So in that regard, um, it's a lot of work for the defense because you get little to work with. So it requires a more aggressive approach to hire maybe a private investigator, multiple experts that you're going to need to impeach your credibility of the state's case against you.
And just from a perspective, because I just want to also ask you about this, it leads into my next question. So because I worked for attorneys many years ago as a legal assistant, and one of the attorneys I worked for, she practiced family law. And this was in early 2000s, and I remember there was someone that came in divorcing, bitter, and just like false allegation came up. And the child was put through so many tests and seeing so many different doctors and so many, and it turned out she even said, I was angry. He's leaving me for another woman. I'm angry. I made it up. And after the fact, after the child went through all of this, and I just thought, that is awful. Like, how could you ever do that? And from
Yeah.
a personal perspective too, because you were talking about back in the 80s, I had a good friend in Maryland when I live in Florida now, but I grew up in Maryland. And right after we moved, a family friend who had gotten divorced, and she had two children, a son and a daughter, and these accusations turned out to be true. And the father was, molesting the daughter every time she would go to visit. And she told her mom, they went to the judge. The judge didn't believe her. And she got to a point where she didn't want to go and visit. And, it got to a point where they had to force her to go visit. And she was 14 years old. She went to go stay with him. She wrote a suicide note saying, I can't live like this anymore. And she left his house, walked down, this is early in the morning, walked down to a highway and threw herself in front of a tractor trailer. And I think about her often. Her name was Cynthia, and she would have been around the same age I am today. And I just think how bad could it have been that you know what I mean, that you took your life and you took it in such a drastic way. And I guess my question is, because like you had mentioned earlier, sometimes attorneys go, I don't need help. I don't need help in this case. And they're not bringing on an expert witness or somebody of your caliber, but they should because of that, because it could go one way or the other. And what do you think are the key qualifications an attorney should look for when when they're looking for a forensic consultant in matters like this? Because, whether it's child sexual abuse or domestic abuse, you know, they need to consider, hey, I should get help on this case, but what should they be looking for?
So obviously, there's a section in my book, Elusive Innocence, and at my website, abuseexcuse.com, how to choose your attorney. I think there's an art and science to picking the right lawyer, not throwing darts at the dartboard.
Mhm.
So I think you look for a lawyer who's board certified in criminal law or family law or juvenile dependency law, whatever the court jurisdiction is of the case or cases.
Mhm.
You might have a case that, as I say in my book, is in the three-ring circus, juvenile, family, and criminal court all at the same time. Good luck on finding the right lawyer who can litigate and try all three of those cases. So you might need multiple lawyers. I think you need a lawyer with experience, a lot of experience, at least 10 or 15 years. I think you need great AVO reviews, right?
Mhm.
avvo.com. I think you need to try to vet those reviews because the lawyer is always going to keep those reviews tight to their vest, attorney-client privilege. So you're not going to get names or demographics or email addresses or text messages, phone numbers you could text the client. That won't happen. My references are an open book at my website, but lawyers, and not to say I don't provide confidentiality in cases. Of course, I have to provide attorney work product confidentiality.
Mhm.
But so I think with attorneys it's more difficult. But like in California, for example, they have special certifications. You can be a CFLS, Certified Family Law Specialist,
Mhm.
is the cream of the crop litigators in California. You can be CWLS, Certified Welfare Law Specialist, for the cream of the crop who litigate and try child dependency and TPR cases in California. I think that's what you look for.
Mhm.
Uh, to get any run-of-the-mill lawyer who does bankruptcy and wills and DUI and arson and bank robbery, and oh yeah, I might do one child sex case a year. No, this is a very dynamic field. The law and the science change very rapidly. You have to stay up on that.
Have you been finding when the false allegations are proven in court, the person who made those allegations, are they being held accountable? Are you finding in some jurisdictions they are and some they're not? Or
Well, most of my cases, Kerry, are child sex abuse, where the accused is facing obviously felony conviction, prison time, and sex offender registration.
Mhm.
There's always that fallback plan B for the sex offender registration. Prosecutors would rather they get that life SOR, sex offender registration. They don't care so much about the prison time.
Mhm.
So the accountability is up to the judge, obviously, for sentencing purposes. In fact, in Florida, Governor DeSantis just reinstituted the death penalty for child rape under 12, right? Very, very extraordinary. Will a case ever happen? I don't know about that. It certainly would be challenged
Mhm.
by attorneys, maybe even the ACLU. But the reality is, I'm all for the strictest punishments against those who would perpetrate our most precious resource, our children. But I'm also for adhering to and executing Florida Statute 39.205, subsection 9, which is in Florida, it's a felony, a third-degree felony to falsely accuse somebody else of child abuse,
Mhm.
premeditated maliciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Obviously the show's called Chromatic Counsel, and I always like to ask all of my guests a little question about color. And I'm curious, in your work with children or even in the courtroom, have you found that certain colors, help create a better connection or set the right tone when you're working in these high stress situations?
Well, Kerry, I always wear black in court with a white shirt. And there's a reason for that because these cases are black or white. There's no gray area. You either did this abuse or you didn't. It's kind of a subtle message I'm trying to send to the judge and the jury. Although the jurors may not pick up on that because, with all due respect, they're lay people.
Mhm.
but I always loved Johnny Cash. Black is my favorite color. It's what I wear in court. So I'm not a high flamboyant red or pink color guy, orange, whatever. And I just think a court is it's a solemn place, right? Somebody's going to be a winner and somebody's going to be a loser.
Mhm.
And the judge is charged with making that decision. The judge is charged with credibility of witnesses. The judge is charged with Rule 704, the ultimate issue at bar, of whether you abuse the kid or not. So it's a very serious place. Rules and procedures have to be followed, and certainly, impeachment comes and goes based on having chemistry with the lawyer, being on the same page, working as the three musketeers with the lawyer and the client, or not.
Mhm.
So all egos have to be parked on the side of the road.
Yeah. And I love that you're using like the black and the white. You're either guilty or you're not. And you're right. And that's what I've always heard from attorneys. They're like, law is black and white. There's no gray area there, or there's very little. The attorneys that are listening to the show, that might be representing clients who are worried about, getting a false allegation, what proactive steps would you recommend that they take early on in like a divorce or custody process just to protect themselves and be proactive?
So I basically, everybody I talk to now, I tell them to get a body cam. Go to Amazon and get your $40 body cam, right? It's called a BWC, that the police wear, body worn camera,
Mhm.
just like the police have. You can have mini audio video cams installed at your house, inside your house, and at the front door. And look, there comes a time when you might become over paranoid about possibilities, right? But there's little accountability here, so you might not have the availability of a witness going with you every time you're going to pick up your kid,
Mhm.
or every time you're going to go to the grocery store and something could happen. So. You got to have that body cam, and really you got to wear it all the time, especially in your vehicle as well. So and then start a timeline, which is a journal or chronology by dates and events. If you think something's going to happen, even you may anticipate, have vision, something's going to happen, but it hasn't come to fruition yet. You still need to document all that because your lawyer's going to need all that information. The lawyer is your quarterback. The lawyer controls the litigation. I'm the running back. Oftentimes, I score the touchdown as the running back, but the lawyer is the first person of contact. I
Mhm.
come on the scene later on. Once the discovery comes in, once the records come in, the forensic interview on DVD of the child interviewee victim, that's when I get going with my work.
And with the journal, do you think it's a good idea to do a handwritten one or one that's electronic that you would do in Microsoft Word or keep on your computer? Or do you think it matters?
Well, I think both are helpful, and of course now with family court, uh, judges usually require that the communications between litigants occur via parenting app, right? Talking Parents, Our Family Wizard, app close, not by text messages.
Mhm.
And so everything's official, and you can call all those messages to see if there's parental alienation, denigration, or vilification of one parent by the other parent in front of the child, where the child is, that parent is trying to extricate the other parent out of the family unit, or so that parent doesn't have any more visitation rights.
Mhm. And it's interesting because I just had Renee Bauer. She was on the podcast earlier this week. We recorded her episode, and she's a family law attorney based out of Connecticut. She created, I think it was called Co-Pilot. It's a co-parenting app for, you know, parents who just can't communicate anymore and just, need to have that third party. So they seem to be coming, much more prevalent these days. Yeah. So if you had to pick
I'll have to check
one
that one out.
yeah. If you had to pick one piece of advice for a lawyer who's working with a client who's falsely accused of abuse, what would that be? What would be that one key piece of advice?
Well, I would say certainly believe in your client's innocence before you accept that retainer check. and be aggressive and be accountable to your client and always give 110% effort, whatever that effort means, whether you have to retain a private investigator, an expert, both, or whether you think you can do the job without any help.
Mhm.
Uh, but when you get the government involved, the police, child protective services, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, and people they need all the help they can get. So yeah, I'm glad that you shared that. And I want to thank you, Dean, for being on the show today and sharing everything that you did. I do have the links in the show notes, so anyone who wants to get in touch with Dean directly can click on the links below and get in touch with him and talk with him. Um, and again, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if today's episode helped you or resonated with you, I hope you will click on the like button, subscribe so you know when we publish our next episode of Chromatic Counsel. And if you know of an attorney who is looking for a little extra guidance or needs some extra resources, help, or even a little extra color in their life, please make sure that you share this episode with them. And I hope that you can tune in next time. And that is a wrap for this episode of Chromatic Counsel.